Welcome back to another episode of Browns Bites. The Browns win 27-3, and this is a weekend to savor. For me, our football team won, Ohio State won, and the Browns won in comfortable fashion. And in my world, anything that makes my life less stressful is a good thing. In this case, I'm not as a monster Ohio State fan. I wish them well. I'm fortunate enough to have a kid I coached on the team. But mostly, I can't take people who immediately want to fire Ryan Day for everything. So that's a plus. The Browns winning in comfortable fashion is wonderful, in part because he beat the brakes off Mike Vrabel, so I don't have to deal with that for a little while. Even though I understand Mike Vrabel is from the Akron area, and yes, we all walk around and piss excellence. I get it. The Browns have a good coach. Mike Vrabel is a good coach. I'm not here to rip him. That's all well and good. Now, my co-host who threatened to quit last week, I think she embodied the message of one Kevin Stefanski's resilience to a T. And even though she was not born or has lived in Akron, she is an Akron quality person in Bree. Here we go.
I am all the way back. Number one, I am floating, Pete. So yeah, I feel like last week was a million miles away from where I was in that mindset to coming off of this just fantastic weekend that all started with a Saturday night Buckeyes last second victory to a Browns Sunday victory to a Travis Kelce Taylor Swift confirmation. I have not come down from this high, and I kind of want to just stay in this moment forever, Pete. So this is going to be a great podcast. I'm so excited.
Yes, and the Notre Dame part of that is also entertaining to me because, one, shout out to my friend Kyle who celebrated a birthday, who's a Notre Dame fan. I want Notre Dame to suffer as long as they refuse to join the Big Ten forever, because I watch games like we just saw, and I sit here and go, okay, they can play Wisconsin next week, or they can play Michigan this next week, or they can play any number of teams. We can do this all year long, and yet we don't. And it's very disappointing to me. I really like their head coach, but
I do too. Yeah.
I think their team is very good, but I have argued for a little while that Notre Dame should not have a math department because they can't figure out how $55 million is more than what they're making on their TV contract, which Indiana and Purdue are getting, which they are not because they want to be independent. And in this case, the math department issue works again because they couldn't count to 11. So I really like everything they got going on there, but them's the rules. Join the Big Ten or continue to suffer. So that was also a nice little benefit. So yeah. As for the Browns, we got after just an awful game from Deshaun Watson, we got a redemption of sorts. He played really, really well. And I'm curious, Bree, I've gotten ripped for my opinion on the game. I'm curious what you think in that. I thought Deshaun Watson played well. I thought he delivered the game he had to deliver. I thought he got more comfortable as the game went on, but that there were some ugly plays in the mix. And I was very nervous going into this game for some reason. Given what we just saw, I was like, oh, let's not have that. And to open the play with him tripping over his own feet, not a great way to start. Now, I thought it was great sportsmanship by the Titans to give him the time to pick himself up, dust himself off, and not bother to cover the receiver he was trying to throw to. I thought that was nice on their part. I thought that was very good sportsmanship from them. But between that and some of the other things I saw, I know people are like, this is what I get. Like, he was awful last week, and now I have to praise him as if this is the greatest game he will ever play. It's certainly the best game he's played with the Browns. It's certainly the game he needed to have. But my opinion is I think there's a lot more in there. I think he's got room to continue to get better and better, and that this was a good step, but there's more to come.
So I have to say, we spent all of last week's podcast episode really just saying that we needed him to be average. I will say, when you look at this game collectively from Deshaun, he was better than average. Now, it wasn't average sustained every single quarter. It did start off a little bit shaky in terms of the first play of him tripping over Jerome Ford, I was really just hoping in the moment that that was not foreshadowing as to what was about to come, because it felt like it was doomed to happen just based on all of the gross history and superstitions that we have tied to this football team specifically. To your point, he looked way more comfortable as the game went on. And in fact, I almost felt like it was a turning point from when he tried to throw a backwards lateral pass, which was a terrible decision. No idea where his head was at on that specific situation. But again, I feel like that's him trying to force things to happen. Yeah. And so it was at that moment in time, Pete, and I was there in person, that the crowd was booing like crazy, because up until that point, the offense looked okay, still not clicking. There were some flashes, but nothing that felt like we were going to dominate offensively. So after he kind of regained his composure after that, it was almost like that needed to happen. Like it's just like needed to happen. And then he bounced back, but he got creamed, I think, on the hit later, right after that play. And DTR was actually about to come into the game, and the fans were cheering like crazy, Pete. People wanted to see DTR so bad. And I'm sitting there holding my breath like, oh gosh, like this is bad. Like this is bad. Like we can't at this point in game 3 of the season be hoping for our rookie backup to come in to be a spark on offense. If that is where we are at, we are in really deep trouble. Anyway, he dusted himself off. He fixed his socks. The sock fixing was a theme of the whole game. So whoever the equipment manager is, please figure out his socks. I don't know what was happening with the socks.
He does mess with those a lot. Yeah.
I don't know if that was nerves or like a little bit of anxiety, but yeah, the socks, it was a distraction. So after that, he came in, they made a couple of plays. He got the Jerome Ford touchdown, which was incredible. I mean, it felt like, Pete, in the stadium, there was a huge weight lifted off of all of our shoulders.
Absolutely.
Like they needed that. He needed that specifically so bad, just so badly. I don't know how else to explain it, but if they wouldn't have converted for a touchdown on that drive, it would have gotten ugly.
Yeah, that's why I think a lot of the people who are yelling at me about not giving him enough credit are revising history, because to your point, it didn't feel like the Browns had total control of the game until the third quarter, in a game where they gave up 3 points, and the 3 points were charity. It wasn't clean. It was the first drive was stressful as hell for me. And then you get into the second half. Like the first half, he's doing good things, don't get me wrong, but it felt like a lot of work. Second half, he got comfortable, and you saw him seeing things that he hadn't seen up to that point. He was now anticipating throws. The one that's been shown a lot is where he's hitting a square into Donovan Peoples-Jones, where he reads the defender sliding out, knows this is where the window is going to be, boom, hits it. Like those type of plays we haven't seen to this point. Like a lot of what he's succeeded with, and credit to the offensive game plan, they've been doing things where he's been comfortable with. A lot of those hitches and stops and back shoulder fades and stuff like that, where he's done really well. I think the back shoulder fade is right now the best throw he has in his arsenal. He's been killing that all year, whether it's a stop or like that back shoulder throw to DPJ, where like Donovan Peoples-Jones didn't have a choice but to catch that ball, was really encouraging. But it was work, and it was clunky, and they needed penalties and a lot of those things. Now, again, it's not to say he was bad. I never made that argument. I've said he's played well. My thing is, I think there's more there. I think it's going to get better. Now, some of that is because the Browns' running game is not good at this moment. Losing Nick Chubb was obviously bad, but like defenses, the Tennessee Titans saw what the Pittsburgh Steelers did, and we're just going to throw guys at the line of scrimmage, generate as much pressure as possible, and see if Deshaun Watson was going to be able to read quickly and keep his eyes up long enough to find open receivers. He passed that test, which, by the way, is very important. I can't understate that. Like, that's a huge deal, because I think as he continues to do that, I think it's going to help the running game go.
I was going to say it's really important that happened because of that fact alone, with the running game not having Nick Chubb in it anymore. Like they need to have a passing game and a passing threat specifically.
But like, and that sort of bleeds into play calling. Like that first drive, it was clear the Browns did not trust the interior. One, the Titans have a good front. Jeffrey Simmons is a phenomenal football player. They've got a good defensive line. They've got a good front seven in general. They are a good run stopping team. And the Browns did not trust their guys to be able to do that. You saw a lot of plays that, like, for whatever reason, everybody called like the entire drive trick plays when it was just stuff that you don't, bootlegs and some waggle type action. But the only thing that was like a trick play, and the Browns have done this for years, was the reverse into the flea flicker where they've got guys going down the field, but they also set up the screen. I actually really like that play. And they executed. And frankly, I thought they could have gotten more yardage if Elijah Moore wasn't impatient trying to cut it back. He allowed the defensive tackle to cut it down pursuit, but like, it wasn't like bread and butter. Okay, we can turn around and hand the ball off. It felt like they had to do this to move the ball, which is troubling in the moment. But as we've said, like, they managed to figure things out. They managed to get going. But like, the better Deshaun Watson is, I thought he did a better job. He took one stupid sack, which still drives me nuts. And it is nitpicking, but it still pisses me off. 2nd and 2, it's nothing there. He runs the sideline and takes what is a sack, loses 2 yards instead of just throwing it away. So it becomes 3rd and 4. Now they convert, great. But like those type of plays, 2 yards could mean a lot, especially with the way the Browns were outgunned sort of up front. So like those type of things I wish he would not do. But the thing I really appreciated about what I saw was his strength in the pocket. There were a couple of plays where you said, oh man, how did he get out of that type thing? And then didn't make the play worse, which is what we want. Made some good plays where he was able to shake some stuff loose and then find receivers. But then also that was also the situation that involved the Aaron Brooks-esque toss backwards to Elijah Moore, which went for negative 16 yards. And like, again, part of the reason people can sort of look at this and go, well, he played way better than that, you're just nitpicking, is if that was a close game and that's the type of play where you like lose the drive or whatever, like those plays matter. Or where he trips, if the defense is right there and you can't get the ball out and it's a sack and you're now behind the sticks, like those plays add up and you become. The Browns have way too many negative plays against the Steelers. They got better in this game, which is important, but like, it's easy to sit there and go, well, he played great and we can ignore these plays because they won by 3 scores. They need to eliminate those. And here's the thing, like, Deshaun Watson's the first one to tell you this. He in his post game, he's been pretty upfront about like, he knows he needs to deliver. He knows he needs to be good. The contract and everything else. He knows those things are important. So, I like the game plan. There were a couple play calls I did not love. The quarterback sweep, I was cool with the fake in, I don't know if it's true read or not, what ended up being a quarterback counter where Deshaun got 10 yards and then of course got blasted. But I don't love his mobility as far as just pure speed right now. And it, I don't know if you saw the same thing, but it just sort of looks like, yes, he's mobile, but he's not Lamar Jackson. And yes, there are things where it kind of works, but I think we're getting a little bit of.
Yeah, it feels a little bit forced almost. Yeah. Listen, we needed this game. We needed this game. Like, we needed to see it as fans because with all of the games that Deshaun has played for the Browns, there have been a lot of variables in them. Weather has been a factor since he joined the team. The rust has been a factor from taking as much time off as he did from the game of football. And then the Steelers atrocity that we witnessed on Monday Night Football didn't leave us with a good taste in our mouth. And so if Deshaun Watson would have came out in this game and looked like he did in the first quarter, the entire game, we'd have a way different conversation right now. And so I think that's like what we all need to focus on, is that we did see the improvement. And now people want to say like, well, Tennessee's not really a great team, right? Like that's the counter argument that I've been seeing, where they've got a great run defense, but their secondary is not great. Okay, fine. We did what we needed to do to take advantage of the secondary. He had a lot of connections to Amari Cooper that were critical in this game.
Mhm.
He wasn't overthrowing. He wasn't throwing balls in the dirt. I mean, yeah, there were things that weren't great, but at the end of the day, there were more positives than the negatives. Like, sure, like we got to hang on to the ball. We can't turn it over. We can't take these sacks. He can't make careless mistakes like he did. And hopefully that's something that he continues to learn from as he starts to continue to trust in the offense and with his receivers and with the team. And again, this is an offense that's going to be without Nick Chubb. So it's going to look a little bit different. And Kareem Hunt is starting to get involved again. And Jerome Ford is definitely not Nick Chubb. But, it's going to be a passing heavy offense. And we need him to be good. Like he has got to excel in the passing game. Listen, I was happy. I felt like the third and the fourth quarter, I was happy. But I also know that part of that feeling comes from having the dominant defense that we do. Mm-hmm. And so when you couple that with Deshaun Watson and this offense, then it leaves me less worried about Deshaun like elevating to that level. Because again, we've talked about it. We really need him to be average. And that was enough. That was enough yesterday. And I would say he was slightly above average. I mean, his completion percentage was good. He was effective. You have those negative plays, but like this is a really good stepping stone into hopefully what's to come. I mean, it's going to be a big match on Sunday against the Ravens. And is he going to look more like Tennessee Deshaun Watson, or is he going to look more like the Pittsburgh Steelers Deshaun? What are we going to get?
Yeah, and I think fair or not, that's baked in that it can't just be a one game, performance. Criticizing the Tennessee Titans being bad, fair, I guess. In some ways, they're not a great team. Like when you looked at the first month of the season, you were going, got to have that one, which is fine. But I watched the Pittsburgh Steelers play a god awful Raiders team. I see people going, "Oh, they're fixed. Their offense is fixed." Like, yeah, they played a awful Raiders team. And like Matt Canada went to the doctor and said, "My offense is broken." And he said, "Take a Raiders defense and call me in the morning." Like the schedule's going to work out in some cases. And like, given what happened in Pittsburgh, you needed anything. So yes, the Titans are not a great defense. But at the same time, Deshaun Watson passed the test. And like we talked about, the second half was, I think, where things got going for him in a way that were really important. You mentioned the running backs. The running game's got to get better as we go. I think Deshaun Watson playing better is going to be really helpful. But one of the things I think Kevin Stefanski did a really good job of was utilizing them in the passing game. I love the play call that got Jerome Ford the touchdown. I love the fact a second-year player who does not have a ton of game experience, a former high school wide receiver, great double move. Deshaun Watson throws a great ball to him, obviously wide open, but like they didn't miss. Play design was great. The people who want to criticize Kevin Stefanski, I don't know how many of these plays we get into that red zone area or wherever where you get a great call, whether it's the quarterback trap against the Bengals or this play here where you're sitting there going, wow, that was an awesome play. Good design, great execution. Jerome Ford deserves a ton of credit for what he was able to do to the DB, but like that was a credit of the play, the call. And I think that has the opportunity to help take some pressure off. The fact that he had 33 yards on 2 catches, like that's a big kind it's obviously a big reason why they drafted him. Kareem Hunt was fine. But they used him the same way. They got him going on the screen game. Like those things are really helpful for a team that's got to find different ways to create offense. I think the Browns answered that question in this week. Now going forward, we'll see where it goes. It's interesting that they play the Ravens next week, which has been a game where the role Kareem Hunt plays has really been a thorn in their side if they can continue to do some of those things. But like that was a good game planning decision design that sort of allowed them to have success. So I was really happy with that. To me, best player on offense was Amari Cooper. Like he was it.
Just love him.
He got absolutely hosed on the one call.
Oh my gosh, that was terrible. Terrible.
Yeah, it was just
I've never
like it
seen
wasn't
Kevin
even
Stefanski
close.
so
It was
fired up.
not close. Even Zagura and
Not
like the
even
radio
close. I
booth
mean,
was
he was like a
screaming.
foot inbounds.
Yeah. So he gets completely hosed on that play, but he still ends up with like 100 and something yards off 6 catches. But like, I don't think that goes far enough into telling how good he was because he drew 3 penalties that were drive extending or whatever. Like they could not deal with him in that game. And like, I don't
Listen,
think
Pete, all I've been asking for is for the Browns to get the benefit of pass interference calls for like the last 3 years. And it seemed like we never actually had anyone capable of drawing those types of penalties for us. I mean, this is what you see the Steelers pretty much like live and die by when it comes to their receivers. So, I saw a couple of comments and just even hearing chatter amongst the fans in the stands of like the Browns are getting bailed out by penalties. So what? Like, I will take that. I will take that all day long because Amari Cooper is amazing. And that was all that they could do to try to salvage themselves from being able to defend him. And I'm happy that the refs actually made the call for it. But yeah, if Deshaun Watson like gets him the ball and goes for it, like this actually becomes a threat for the Browns.
And, sometimes, yes, they extended drives based on penalties. But here's the thing. They were penalties. It wasn't
Correct.
like bad calls. Like I love the Titans DBs who were like going through the play and then bragging about it, and then they show the replay clearly like
that number 0
grabbed on.
He had a rough day. He's getting picked on.
Yeah, so like you're just looking at it, you're going, but like I really like Elijah Moore. I like what he can do for this offense. I like Donovan Peoples-Jones. I like David Njoku. But there was never a doubt who the dude was as far as your top receiver. This is now the second year in a row where it's unquestionably Amari Cooper. And I'm perfectly happy to let people sleep on him as he continues to pile up big games and win. Like, again, he was the best player on offense. So the other part
he was in for a touchdown on that catch too, where they called him out of bounds. Like,
yeah, and
he was like juking saying, the guy.
People are like saying, well, the DB stopped going. I'm going to take Amari Cooper to beat one guy between him and the end zone. He's 215 pounds and athletic and everything else.
So can I tell you something? Maddox, I'm going to go back to a Maddox story. Well, number one, he loves Amari Cooper. So like, love this for all of us. He plays this game at recess. It's called, I don't know, Capture the Dragon or something. I have no idea what it is, but it involves a ball and running. It sounds like football, Pete, but it's Capture the Dragon. And he came home from school last week and he was like, Mom. It's like, what? He was like, I juked everyone on the playground and Capture the Dragon. And so now his favorite thing is watching the highlights of the game to see like how many dudes are juking people on the field. So I specifically was showing him the Amari Cooper highlights and he was all about it, but he was mad he didn't get to see that juke like live to fruition. So I'm here for this. I'm here for this, Pete.
So the Elijah Moore piece is interesting. I really like them getting the ball on some of those passing concepts early. I understand why they're using him as a running back, and I think there's some things he can do.
No.
But I also sit there and go,
Listen, I want Elijah Moore to be an integral part of this offense and a weapon and a threat. I definitely think it's something that needs to happen in complement to Amari Cooper. I was over the fact of how many times in the game yesterday they tried to make him a running back. I mean, it felt very forceful the amount of times that he was directly handed the ball off. And the results of the play were like 1 to 2 yards, maybe, if anything. So listen, again, I'm okay to try it out. It's not working. So let's just not go. Can he just be a wide receiver? Like, can we not get him going as an actual wide receiver and have him get open in space and use his speed that way? And Pete, I am also willing Marquise Goodwin to score a touchdown. I have bet on Marquise Goodwin to score an anytime touchdown for the last 3 weeks, and I have not seen it happen.
I was surprised they didn't take any shots downfield with him. He didn't play that much.
No, you know what? There was one play. It was early on. I forget if it was the first or the second quarter. He actually was like wide open. Like he burned his man, and Deshaun, I don't even think looked his way. But that was my moment. That was my moment. And they let me down.
Which is sort of interesting. Anyway, to finish up the Elijah Moore thing, I'm trying to buy into the fact that it's going to set up for something later, whether it's just passing to him out of the backfield, like on a wheel or something, or that if the Browns continue to build and Deshaun Watson continues to build on what he's doing, that they're going to be able to create more spacing where he's going to be able to have more success. But to your point, and I have the same sort of feeling with designed runs for Deshaun. I kind of get it, but I'm also sitting here going, maybe let's.
I don't know, Pete. It's giving me Odell Beckham like vibes.
Oh no.
Like from what, like with Kevin and Odell, like I don't know what it is, but like this offense, like we can have more than one featured receiver. Like so many teams have an offense that features so many good weapons. I mean, I don't even want to bring up Miami because they are clearly on an entirely different level altogether. But like, come on, like Amari can eat, Elijah can eat, like David Njoku has been like, I don't know where. That's another like mind-boggling thing to me that I can't quite figure out. But like that's what I want to see more of. Like we've got to figure out ways to get these playmakers involved. I mean, we have weapons. This team has weapons. So we got to figure out how to unlock them and exploit mismatches against other defenses because it's not going to get easier. Like every single team, as witnessed in the Arizona Cardinals Dallas Cowboys game yesterday, like every matchup is going to be difficult. It doesn't matter who you play. So like, let's figure this thing out. Like, let's get it clicking on all cylinders.
I agree with you. It's interesting that we're complaining about this on a day where Deshaun went 27 to 33.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, these are good problems.
But what you end up with is like it's a good problem to have, and it's upside. Like traditionally in Kevin Stefanski's offense, they're just somebody just ends up being that guy in the game where he's just open, and they're not whatever it is. They're just allowing him to make plays. I was happy to see more Donovan Peoples-Jones in this game because he just does good stuff. I think that's going to be the thing. I think as they get this, and if they, particularly against a team like the Ravens, where I think the Browns are probably going to utilize empty a lot, they're going to have those opportunities, and then they're going to go into the bye week, and I think it's just going to be continuing to build from there. And I think that's going to be the long-term sort of evolution of this. It goes hand in hand with Deshaun Watson getting better, is just finding ways to utilize all of the guys they have. Because I agree, David Njoku should be a featured target. I think Elijah Moore can do more. And again, he had a fine game. Him and DPJ had fine games, but I think as we go, we want to see more of those things. And we want to see Marquise Goodwin come and get involved and get that shot down the seam. Like that's where you sort of like, it's awful not having Nick Chubb because personally, I think Jerome Ford looks like the perfect number 2 back for Nick Chubb. But at the same time, like they get to sort of explore and see where they can find. And like we saw a good result at Tennessee. I'm hoping that we go and we see that against the Ravens that they, there's another level they can get to and they can continue to build on this. And then, whether it's a month or 6 weeks or whatever, that suddenly we're talking about, oh man, everybody's getting involved and this thing's really clicking. So that part's interesting.
Yeah, I want teams coming in to play against the Browns to be fearful of the offense. I want them to be uncertain as to who's going to have a breakout game, who they should be covering. I want it to look a little bit easier, if that makes sense. I still feel like getting first downs is sometimes like pulling teeth. And I want some easier 10-yard gains. Pete, I don't know. It still feels a little bit like a struggle.
The one thing they did really well this past game was staying out of 3rd and long. They stayed on schedule, which it's that simple. When you can stay on schedule, it just gives you more options. It gives you a little bit more room for error. It opens up the playbook. It makes the defense honest, and it created opportunities for Deshaun Watson to sort of pick them apart, which was good to see. And along with that, I think And we talked about this last week. Deshaun Watson needs to get the ball out of his hands more. I think he was better in that. I think he helped his offensive line a lot more in this game, which they needed. It's tough. Jedrick Wills often on an island is not good, not a particularly good player. This was his best game. DeJuan Jones is a rookie. Like, it's not easy to do this, and having the tackles you have, so Deshaun Watson being able to help those guys is going to be super important. That's another element. That's another, to me, an ingredient in potentially getting more out of the running game, is helping those guys as much as possible, continuing to get the defense in situations where they have to be honest to both situations, because when you do that, it's going to help you offensively, keep them off balance, create more running lanes, all those things. So I like all those things. Bree, what is your favorite stat so far from this defense? Because all yesterday was, after the game, was the just numbers all over the place of the Browns through 3 weeks, or just the game.
Hang on, I got to pull up the tweet that I retweeted today, I think from Brad. To be honest with you, I was a bit shocked. Like, it feels weird that this is the team that I root for. Okay, well, first of all, they rank first in a lot of things.
Indeed.
So maybe just overall, this is crazy. I don't know. So yesterday I looked at the scoreboard and going into halftime, and Tennessee had negative 12 rushing yards, I believe, going into halftime.
Yes.
So that was pretty fun.
It's like -2, I think.
They've only allowed 7 first downs per game. You know what, Pete? Can you just read the stats? Also, they like popped up in some crazy like historical statistic.
Yes.
Like, on a positive level. We're used to being statistically like viewed in the negative light of like, this never happens.
So in terms of things like yardage given up per play, it's like 3.2. And some other 3 and out percentages are like 65.1%, which is just stupid. Like, they're not just the best Browns defense of this century. They are in the conversation for the best defense of this century, which is awesome. And, you see things like opponents are converting 19.5% of their third downs. You see things like the 3.2 yards. The stuff I've been geeking out on is the fact that the Browns have given up 1 touchdown on defense, which was part of the worst two play sequence of their season so far in 3 games. They've allowed 1 team in the red zone, which was pity, because Elijah Moore fumbled the ball and they recovered it on the 17, promptly lost 9 yards and had to kick the field goal. That's the only time a team has been in the red zone through 3 games. That's just incredible. And the thing is, I look at this defense and there's still room to get better. I don't think they're going to be able to maintain that efficiency over the entire season, because 52 rushing yards per game or whatever is insane. And all the other stuff they're doing, like, eventually coaches are going to figure out some ways to move the ball. I don't think it's ever going to be easy, because the Browns have talent. So as long as they stay healthy, they're going to be a problem. But through 3 games, as just ridiculously effective as these defenses been, they've forced 2 turnovers, just 2. The Browns are -5 in turnover differential for the season. And they've lost the turnover battle, the turnover battle in every game. The fact that, and that's the difference between 2-1 and 3-0 at this point, is that they are losing on the turnover front. Grant Delpit has both turnovers. He got the interception and fumble recovery against the Steelers. Yesterday, you saw a couple sort of things where you're sitting there going, ooh, hopeful. Myles Garrett forces the fumble they couldn't get. And then Anthony Walker Jr. had a shot at a pick in the red zone. So, like, they're doing so many good things, and I can't help but think they're going to have a breakout game in terms of turnovers. Now, that would be really helpful if that was this week. Just throwing it out there. If they want to cause like 6 turnovers this week to make up some ground, that would be great. And it's interesting because Lamar Jackson, through 3 games, has fumbled already 4 times.
I was going to say, it feels like a forced fumble, like, would be a big possibility here.
So if they can corral him and get to him, as everybody has so far, he's going to give up the ball at some point. So they will have some opportunities. So there's just so much to enjoy about this defense, about everything it's doing. And this was another game. The Steelers was a little different. It was very fun, but it was nerve-wracking because you kept having players leave the field for various
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Zadarius Smith left at one point. Denzel Ward went to the locker room. You're like, oh, Jesus. And it turned out he just needed fluids. And then obviously Greg Newsome missed this game due to the elbow injury. They hope he's back this week. But like this week, no injuries of any kind.
Yes, that
which
was
is
huge.
super refreshing. And then you just continue to see this onslaught where you're just like, you wanted the Browns to score points, but you also wanted the Titans to have the ball again because you were sitting there hoping that Myles Garrett was going to get back there again. He had 3.5 sacks.
Yep.
And just killed Andre Dillard. You just start to feel bad for that kid after a while because he just blew it up. And my favorite thing of this game, I like the fact that Myles Garrett has a thing that he does every game that is just going.
He's like a cat just toying with a mouse.
So he is like prowling behind the defensive line. Like,
I was watching this live.
And then the Titans are trying to trade 2 players to go follow so they can set up to help block. And they did it so many times that they ran out of play clock as they were trying to do this. It was spectacular. So far in 3 games, you've got that crossover, and then you've got this thing where he's so dominant that he just shuts down the other team. Like their brains stop working because he's just running around on the field, just prowling to look for where he's going to go make his next play.
So this was incredible to watch live as it was all coming to fruition because Tennessee was backed up against the dog pound. So they were already in that territory of like the stadium was going nuts. The defense at this point had already been on fire. And I see the defensive line up, and I always like usually zero in on where Myles is in general on the line because he's been in so many different positions this year. And so I see him start like going back and forth like behind the line. I'm like, what is Myles doing? And he would like saunter over to one side and like stop. And then like I would see like the 2 guys follow him. And then he sauntered back over to the other side and the 2 guys followed him. And like everyone like started to catch on to what was happening in the stadium. And then obviously they had to burn the timeout, but we were all like, I mean, it was incredible. I mean, Pete, this is what we've been waiting for. We have been waiting for a defense that not only is really good, they're having fun and they know they're good. Like that sounds maybe really cocky to say, but as someone who has had to watch the Steelers dominate our football team for the last 2 decades, I welcome this because this is how Steelers fans must feel, right? That they always have a chance, regardless of who they play, when they play, what time they play, because they have a really good defense with a TJ Watt anchor. Like Pete, this is it for us. Like this is a defense that is going to win us football games. They're going to win us football games. And like, I'm okay kind of falling back on that. Like, I hate to say that we are living parallel lives right now to the Steelers. And that's going to change, by the way, because I think our offense is much better. But right now, like, this must be how it feels. Yes.
Now I will defer to your basketball expertise on this, but this feels like the difference between LeBron James playing with Larry Hughes and Wally Zerbiak and those guys compared to,
you just know you're better,
to then having, Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving and all those other dudes where you're like, all of a sudden it's a whole lot of fun because he's got help.
Yeah.
He's not physically exhausted at the end of games because he has to drag the team.
Yeah. I mean, like that's the thing about it that I'm actually most happy about is for Myles being able to be in this situation where not only is he dominant, but he is surrounded by other really good football players that like they're all elevating each other. Mm-hmm. That's what we want. It's not a negative. Like this isn't a knock on Myles the last couple of years where it's like Myles didn't do anything. You didn't wreck the game. Like we want Myles to completely take over the game. Well, listen, like TJ Watt's an amazing football player. I'm not taking that away from him, but he's also been surrounded by talent all around him. So he has been able to excel dominantly. Like imagine this for the next few years of like Myles Garrett and being in this system and with these other players. I mean, even watching the linebackers is so much fun. I mean, they look incredible, like flying around, JOK making a difference, Anthony Walker. I mean, Pete, like, it's fun. This is a lot of fun.
Is anybody on this team having more fun than Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah?
No, absolutely
Every
not.
play, he's loving life.
just flying around. He is like a lightning bolt.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like, so like the Tennessee Titans are a good example. Like their whole thing is Derrick Henry's got to go north-south. Obviously they clogged it up. Their defensive line won the line of scrimmage, and like he had to go east-west. So when he's trying to go outside, like let's say he barely gets outside the defensive line, suddenly there are three guys flying downhill who are just like, nope. And it's, it's JOK, it's Anthony Walker, it's Grant Delpit, Martin Emerson at one point got in there. Like it's endless. They're like rabid dogs out there just getting after it. And it's awesome. I think my favorite.
And Pete, sorry, like I think the other thing, and you may be going there. I don't mean to cut you off. Like seeing even when the opposing team is able to complete passes, having guys completely wrapped up or being there to like stop it, because that's something else that we just haven't really experienced. It always kind of felt like we would miss tackles, guys would whiff, we would just completely be out of our element overall. And so like it is truly like they are swarming. We have guys swarming and ready.
There were missed tackles, but that's the thing. Like this is the difference between this year and last year. Like last year, you'd have one guy and he missed a tackle and there's nobody else there.
Yeah.
Here, if you miss a tackle, not great, but then there are three other guys who are right there ready to go. And that's why it's so impactful. But what I was going to say was, one of the things I really liked about this game is you didn't have, like Grant Delpit did not have a superstar performance like he did in previous games. Neither did Denzel Ward, even though he played well. Like a lot of these guys played well. But like you got a big game they didn't play a ton of snaps, but Alex Wright had a big game for Alex Wright in his second year. 3 stops, got the sack, got generated pressure. Maurice Hurst played like 20 snaps or whatever it was, generated pressure, got a big run stop. Like you're getting other guys to step up just by being effective, doing their job one, and then just being effective cogs in a defense that has enough talent where they can lift teammates and allow them to make those type of plays. Like that was really refreshing that you have a guy like Zadarius Smith off the field or Myles Garrett who's off the field for a given play, and it's not stopping them. And if those guys continue to get better, Alex Wright's a guy you look at when they drafted him, he was a long-term project, but he's just a massive body at that base end, and just being able to enjoy success, develop at his own rate without being rushed like he was last year, and hopefully benefit from all that experience. But you're just seeing guys be put in positions where they are going to succeed and they're paying it off, which is what you want to see, because that's going to be the key for not only the Browns to continue staying good the rest of this year, but like staying power over the long haul, that they can develop their own talent, that they can get these guys in the pipeline getting better. Like Cameron Mitchell had to step in yesterday, and yes, he got picked on a little bit, but nothing debilitating. I mean, the offense for the Titans basically melted down into throw it up on the sideline and hope something good happens, either a penalty or catching it up over the top. And it kind of worked for one drive before Myles Garrett just said nope, which I think was probably the biggest moment of the game in terms of just energy, was when he just, the Titans were down in the Browns' end and they wanted to go for a touchdown before they had to settle for the field goal. And Myles Garrett just blew through Andre Dillard and sacked the Titans. And it wasn't just that he sacked them. It was the deflated, just knowing feeling that they were not going to be able to get a kickoff, that it was just done, that was it, that they were just going to leave the field getting nothing. They were hoping they were going to be able to get at least a field goal, come out in the second half and get a good drive going. And they just took the life out of them.
After a timeout, mind you.
Indeed.
That was amazing.
Just the fact that they can continue to, well, and again, Myles Garrett, who doesn't make plays except when he's constantly making plays, just has an ability to just take every bit of wind out of your sails. And this is the same thing. It was, I believe it was Myles Garrett after the Elijah Moore fumble, who just the first 2 plays decked Derrick Henry, got the sack fumble they couldn't recover, and then they lost those 9 yards. Like, he's really, really good. And like, again, you come out of last week where people are like, well, it's Myles Garrett's fault that they lost the game.
Yeah.
Like, he is on just a completely different level. And again, it's like with LeBron James, and I'm not, LeBron James, arguably the greatest basketball player ever. It's different in football. different playing that position. But like, if you are not appreciating what he's doing, you are missing one of the best careers in this team's history, and you're not going to get this back.
100, Pete. 100.
Okay. So all that was good. The Browns win. Special teams was solid. I am trying my best not to initiate an investigation into Dustin Hopkins, who suddenly has a super powerful leg. I am, coming out of
You think he's getting drug tested today after that performance, the 53-yarder?
Like Dustin Hopkins, who has historically never had a great leg and has been sort of pretty iffy from 50 plus, now has a deadly accurate boomstick where he's just piping balls down
straight down the middle. And
it's been great. Like, he's missed one kick so far this year, but like, and part of this is because the Browns played great defense and they're scoring points in general. It's been nice that they haven't had to deal with the whole kicker thing. Now, I would remind people that once again, the Browns scored 3 touchdowns and the Titans scored 0, and that's usually going to be good. As much as people want to get, well, we need the kicker matters and all this other stuff. Score touchdowns and you'll win. But it has been nice. Now, there are certain elements of the other special teams, like Donovan Peoples-Jones. Donovan Peoples-Jones went through an ugly stretch beginning of last year, and it's not been pretty thus far. Yeah. He was bad, really bad against the Steelers. He was sort of just not great this past week. I keep hoping, and I think he will get there where he's going to be able to make some plays. Their coverage units are good for the most part. Obviously, the field goal element is good. Yesterday, Hopkins made a perfect kick that forced the Titans to utilize the rule where they fair caught it even in the field of play. And I think the fans were confused at how that worked, that they thought he was going to be stuck, not realizing that automatically put you at the 25. So that part was good. All of that was great. Perhaps the most uplifting news out of the weekend was Nick Chubb. Not confirmed at this point, but reports talk about the fact that there's less damage than they thought. He may have only torn the MCL. They're suggesting that the ACL was stretched, which does mean there's damage, but the difference between that being torn and not is massive. His kneecap, I think, is intact. None of this is going to be confirmed until they go in and do the surgery, but there's a lot of hope because that is the difference between, obviously, when it happened, people were thinking career ending, but it's a $12 million difference for Nick Chubb. And what I mean by that is Nick Chubb is scheduled to get about $11.775 million next year on his base salary. And there's some bonuses attached to in-game bonuses. If all of this works out as everybody hopes, it's a 6 to 8 month recovery, which, given what we saw, no one would have expected that would be the case. If that is true, that could put him at, if we go the full 8 months, ready by July, easily ready for training camp, which is unthinkable. And if that's the case, like, unless something weird happens, the Browns have made it pretty clear throughout this, like, even as we speculated that maybe they'd move on to Nick Chubb, given that they're Deshaun Watson-led team, that running backs, with the amount of money aren't necessarily worth it. But if Nick Chubb is going to be healthy and able to play next year, I do not think the Browns are going to get rid of him. I think he will get every dollar that he's promised. I think beyond the fact that it's the Haslam's money and you want them to give it away, the fact that Nick Chubb would get that $12 million makes a lot of people happy. But like all of a sudden, it sucks you don't have him, but like the possibility that he will be back next year is a huge lift. I love the fact that Kevin Stefanski drove to his house to give him the game ball. There were a lot of things that Kevin Stefanski did this game that made me happy. That tops them all because people get so mad about the emotional aspect and, him not showing whatever acting they'd like him to do on the sideline, even though we'll get to that in a second. He did at one point sort of get excited with Deshaun Watson. But like, I love this so much because like, that is where people sit there and think, well, we want speeches and all this other crap. Bottom line, obviously they want competence, but I have no doubt that Nick Chubb will remember forever. And he's gotten a lot of game balls in his career, but I suspect this one is going to be very special for him to have his head coach drive to his house. It would have been very easy for them to like send somebody to deliver it. And I assume they had, some conversation. He's probably there for a little bit. That was really gratifying to me. They want him to be a part of this thing. Like everything about this was just good.
Yeah, obviously there was a lot of fan support in the stadium with a lot of people wearing their Nick Chubb gear and jerseys. The players obviously kind of showing their own nod to doing it for Nick Chubb with, Myles Garrett and his I think he had Nick Chubb written on his tape, and then Kareem Hunt shows up. Yeah, pregame wearing a Nick Chubb shirt. He had something underneath his jersey. I couldn't quite tell. I thought that their jerseys had like a Batman like embroidery or emblem like on their collar this week. And maybe I just made that up because I feel like they would have made a big deal about that. And maybe it's always been there. And it's just like mesh, open hole mesh breathability thing. But I got to go back and like deep dive into that. So yeah, overall, you could just tell that it meant a lot. And just knowing what Nick Chubb is to this team and hearing the news that the damage doesn't look as bad as initially expected or reported is just amazing, because Nick Chubb is an extremely hard worker. And if anyone is going to be able to recover from this, like he's going to put in the work and put in the time to come back even better than what he was, which is saying something because Nick Chubb is amazing. So, I'm anxious to see his comeback and what this will look like in his recovery time and all of that. I mean, this will be a welcome sight to have him again in a Browns uniform in the locker room. The other thing that I wanted to say, and I don't know if this was confirmed either. Now I'm just making up stuff for our podcast, but hey, what are we going to do? So I was sitting next to someone yesterday who actually recognized me from Twitter, which is wild because I look normal. I look like an average human being. Shout out Nicole. She was amazing. Her and her husband sat next to us and we had the best time. I'm pretty sure I freaked her out the entire game because I am just a nervous energy walker. I was like, we were hitting each other. We were high-fiving. It was great. And when they did the jet flyover during the national anthem, her husband pointed out, and again, I would love to confirm this, they thought that they flew missing man formation in honor of Nick Chubb. So the Jets were lined up in missing man formation, obviously signifying that the Browns didn't have one of their key players. So I don't know if that's true. I'll have to maybe tweet at JW Johnson to confirm, or if maybe that was just us making something more out of the situation.
I'm going to go with it's true. I have nothing to base that on, but it fits.
Yeah, it just felt like a small detail in the midst of it.
So obviously Kevin Stefanski is often criticized for not being emotional, being very controlled. He's gone on radio stations, including some that still criticize him for this and explain exactly why he does what he does. But when Deshaun Watson came over and, Deshaun Watson sort of broke through and had success through the touchdown, Deshaun Watson tried to go up and chest bump him. This is evidence that Kevin Stefanski is indeed under control. It would have been very easy for him to recklessly try to jump and absolutely blow out a knee or something else. But he thought, no, I have a family to take care of. I need to be able to operate, stand on my feet, and just sort of leaned into him. But nevertheless, like, this is one of the funny parts about this. Like, I don't know if people just assume that Watson is just sort of like saying what he thinks people want to hear, but like he really, really does like Kevin Stefanski for whatever you want to make of that.
Isn't that what we want? Like, we don't want a rift between the head coach and the quarterback. Like, that would be terrible.
Right. So like that was good. And yes, we got to see some emotion, even if it was slightly controlled, because
he swears sometimes. I mean, come on. He's a good Catholic boy.
Mm-hmm. For an Ivy League guy. Speaking of making up stuff, my understanding is that a football player is dating a singer.
No one wants to hear this, Pete. Actually, we might have to do a spin-off podcast. I mean, it just actually might have to be me and Abby. Can we just do a takeover?
I hope Abby's okay. It's been a long.
I messaged her today. I messaged her immediately this morning and said, "What a night for us, Abby." I don't know how we recover or like move forward from this. Physically, I'm exhausted. Emotionally, I'm exhausted, but like all in a really good way. But yes, I think Abby and I need to do a takeover because we know there are a ton of Swiftie NFL football fans out there. We know that not everybody likes Taylor Swift or likes this whole story. I mean, the amount of men infiltrating all of the social media accounts that are posting about it are like up in arms. And it's actually gives me joy to see them all up in arms. But yeah, there's plenty of a Swiftie fans out there that could talk about this for days on end, Pete.
I'm a little disappointed in the Swifties from the standpoint of usually they're at the bottom of this before anyone else is. They know the ins and outs, and there was
speculation.
They allowed themselves to be surprised.
Well, I think a lot of Swifties thought that it was a publicity stunt because a lot of them aren't necessarily football fans. So they didn't quite understand that Travis Kelce is also a star in his own right and that he was trying to gain clout from being connected to Taylor Swift.
Sure.
But I just saw a report that, I mean, E! News is saying that Taylor Swift liked the fact that Travis pursued her and that they're having a great time getting to know each other and that she wants a guy who's into his career, does his own thing, but's also supportive and understands her. I mean, like, come on, like they're the perfect match, like both at the top of their game.
Okay, sure. We'll go with that.
All right. I'm going to have to get Abby on this.
That's probably true. The other, that's in your wheelhouse. This whole weekend has been in your wheelhouse. The other part,
it's just been an incredible weekend.
The other part of this weekend that was in your wheelhouse, we sort of touched on college football. The amount of WWE-esque trash talking from head coaches is the best thing that's ever happened to college football. It's awesome. Now, obviously, if you're an Ohio State fan, you got Ryan Day screaming at Lou Holtz on a microphone in the middle of the field, who's 86 years old, and then went on Pat McAfee where he looked like he was part of the chair. He's so old as he's talking shit about Ohio State and how they're going to lose. And they took this absolutely deadly serious. And he looked like he was going to be, where's Lou Holtz? I want him in a match right now in the middle of this. And you were waiting for his like entrance music and all this other crap. Not only that, like that was like the finish of the night. Before that, we have the Deion Sanders effect, which has been great for the Pac-12 because everybody's been sort of, Deion Sanders is a lightning rod in a lot of ways, and he understands what he is, and he understands what that means. Nobody is, well, I shouldn't say nobody. Very few people don't have an opinion on him. They're either with him or they're against him. And he plays into that. He is always going to be himself, which worked great for this. And then you have the Oregon coach who gives his sort of wrestling promo before the game, talking about how the Oregon Ducks, who notably recruited and started their program based on buying 8 million different variations of the uniforms and were wearing shoes that changed color during the game, were playing for wins, not clicks, while Colorado was doing all these things. And that's fine. Like, as I would explain to anybody, if you're a coach and you've got basically all these celebrities showing up and all this attention and everything, you would absolutely say all of these things to your team. I'm reminded of Georgia last year, where all of Georgia's football team was convinced nobody believes in us, despite the fact that they were the number one with prohibitive favorite to repeat as college national champions. And they're all like, nobody believes in us. Nobody thinks we can do this. It's contrived, it's invented, and it works. It's that Michael Jordan effect. But regardless, and then the fact that Dan Lanning at halftime goes, "We aren't done yet," was awesome. Everything about this is great. And like, here's the thing. Everybody was more, even a game that was like 42 or whatever it was to 7 at the final. People were more invested in that than Alabama Ole Miss, which was 2 ranked teams. There's just so much juice in that game. And like, I think people look, there are people who take it super seriously, which is sort of entertaining from my standpoint, because I don't. I just look at it, all of this as entertainment value, but it's fun to watch. It certainly gets people fired up. It gets more juice into these games. You get these giant atmospheres, which are great. And I think you're going to get the same thing because Colorado's got to play USC this week. You've got the reigning Heisman Trophy winner against this Colorado team, and it's just going to be more hype. And I'm hoping more teams do this. Like, I don't think Nick Saban's ever going to do this, but I did enjoy it, even though it was just utterly insane for Ryan Day to scream at an 86-year-old man. You
know my thoughts on this. It was incredible. Everything was incredible. I mean, plus he was coming off the field in his post-game interview. I mean, and his face already gets like really red, and then the shouting and the screaming and the spitting, and I'm sitting there like a little bit lost because I didn't have any context as to what the heck he was talking about. And then, you log on to Twitter, X, whatever it's called, and you start to piece everything together, and it just kind of completes the entire like story arc and becomes this big thing. And like, I live for that. Like, I want all of this drama in addition to like watching good football games. It truly is entertaining. And then I don't know. I mean, I understand in college how you kind of do have to find that edge, and will your players to think that everybody is against you. I mean, and these are college players. They are not getting paid professionally to play this game. The NIL has changed things a little bit, but I do think these coaches, and Ryan Day specifically, they get really protective of their students and their student athletes. And so that's what I felt like was kind of coming from this, while also hearing the personal shots that he was taking from Lou. But again, like, Lou was in bed by that point.
I just hoped he made it through the night.
Let the man sleep. Let the man sleep. He probably doesn't even remember what he said at this point.
You are always recruiting in college football.
Yeah,
Dan
I mean,
Lanning,
that is a great
Dan Lanning pregame
tactic.
speech is recruiting. Knowing there's a camera there. The halftime thing, he's recruiting. He understands that Colorado, everybody's super excited about this. I won't say it's taking the bloom off the rose of Oregon, given everything they've done, but you're always wanting to make sure that you are present in the mind of these kids. Like right now, Colorado's the big deal. Everybody's super excited about Colorado, and that may get kids excited to go there. So the best way to recruit against them is to beat the brakes off of them to the point where there's nothing left, especially in this scenario where everybody's going to dissolve into new conferences. There's all the more incentive. But Ryan Day is recruiting. He's recruiting against, including kids who have Notre Dame in their selection, breaking it down with the hats and all the other crap. It's all recruiting. It's all great. They are at the mercy of these kids. Their careers are determined by the decisions made by 17 and 18-year-olds, and then increasingly with the transfer portal. They have to do this all the time, which in some ways is utterly ridiculous. And you think about these grown-ass men having to basically live and die on the whims of these college kids. Athletic directors have to do this as well. But at the same time, like, it's fun when they cater it to it in a way that everybody can sort of enjoy it. So I'm here for it. I hope we continue to see this every week, because there are games that you don't care about that you suddenly care about just because the coaches are shooting their mouths off. And it's great.
More, Pete. I want more.
Yes, I would love the NFL to do this, not worry about bulletin board material and just go off on people. It's great. Like, we got the Bengals thing where elves and
the elves. It's amazing.
Which is going to come up again when they play them at the end of the year. Like, more of this. So more rivalry, more meaningless shit talk, more all of it. But with that, do us a favor. We appreciate the support. We got a lot of really supportive comments coming off last week's episode, both privately and publicly, which were great. We're also expanding the audience one pickleball player at a time, thanks to Bree's mom.
Yes, shout out to my mom for spreading our podcast. Shout out to Beth specifically, who is a now new, hopefully, subscriber, and who is as diehard as they come. So yes, Pete, we're going to have to put a banner at the pickleball courts, I think.
Well, I'm wondering if your mom is like angling for like a little segment where she picks games at some point, which we could
100%. She's down for that. She already, she texted me over the weekend and she said, tell Pete I've put in all of my bets for the Titans so that the Browns end up being victorious. I will lose all my money in sacrifice is pretty much where her head is at.
So far, that's what's happening.
It's working.
The Browns are going to play the Ravens this week. Both teams are 2-1. The Ravens just lost in overtime. The Colts in a weird game. So now the Browns, the Steelers, and the Ravens all are 2-1. The winner of this game obviously will come out with a share of first place in the division. In addition to the fact the Browns will have played their third division game in 4 weeks. There's a lot riding the line, a lot of interesting matchups with this. Lamar Jackson, his new offense against the Browns defense, the Ravens defense against the Browns offense. The Ravens are dealing with a lot of injuries. I'm hoping that the Browns can build off what we just saw. I'm hoping that Deshaun Watson can build off what we just saw, because if you back this up and you have another game where you beat the Ravens, suddenly people are really going to be willing to say, okay, he's getting where we need to go. And in this is a game where, even if it's ugly, nobody's going to care. Just beat the Ravens, just get that win, head into the bye week 3-1. that would be awesome. That's the goal for the week. We'll be back to talk about it next week. Hopefully it's just as good as this weekend was. I would love to repeat that.
Floating. I need to be floating.
I don't know if any other football player can date any other pop star at this point that can sort of match the energy that Kelce Swift has. But then again, I'm also worried about Bree's personal sanity on that front, because as I told her, if we find out that Kelce and Swift are playing pickleball, that's going to be it. And
Listen, Pete, my productivity today working was not great. Not great.
We'll be back next week. Thanks everybody for listening. And sounds good.